The next block on the chart are the drivers of competitive behavior and their awareness, motivation, and capability. I'm going to introduce these now, and they're key because they influence a lot of what happens in the discussion after this. First is awareness, and this would seem to be a given that of course everybody's up to what everybody else is doing, but that's just not true. Different firms are better competitor analysis. Different firms pay different levels of attention. Sometimes different firms are better aware of the dynamics of the competitive interplay. In other words, somebody takes a move that they don't think is going to hurt them when in fact it really does hurt them. There was a study by McKinsey back in 2008 timeframe, and it said that based on a worldwide survey of executives, only about 50% of the time were companies aware that a competitor was going to take an action before they actually took the action. In other words, only half the time did they see it coming. The other half the time they didn't know it happened until it was there. And here's the interesting thing about that. That's half the time of when they knew something had happened. What about all the times competitors took actions and they didn't even know that it had happened? And you're going to see that this idea of knowing or being able to prevent them from knowing that it happened is really good for your strategy. The second is the idea of motivation. And this is motivation to outperform, motivation to take competitive actions, whatever. You will sometimes hear companies that say, we don't worry about our competitors. We know our customers. We stay focused on our customers. We look at our customers. We don't care because what our competitors do isn't relevant. And I believe for a certain small segment of firms, that's probably true. For a large segment of the people who say they don't watch their competitors, either A, they're not really, it's not really so. They do in fact pay a lot of attention to their competitors, or B, the fact that they really don't pay attention to their competitors hurts them. Lastly is the idea of capability. Do they have the ability to respond? And this is a very complicated issue. This is going to get into timing and the types of attacks and the likes, and we'll see how they can counter the various moves is going to factor into that. So these are very important factors going to color everything else we talk about. So the next box, and it's got some different labels on it, but it talks about things that influence how firms take competitive actions beyond awareness, motivation, and capability. One of the things I want to talk about is first movers versus second movers. Unfortunately, our textbook really doesn't talk about this. First movers are people that are perceived to be the ones to initiate the step. They launch the new product. They go into the new market, whatever. They go first. And the reasons that the first firms elect to be first movers is one, there's the sense of by them stepping out and being first, that they're going to get a market share initially, and they're going to be able to harvest that money from the initial customers when nobody else has a similar product offering. And then there's that hope that they can maintain that market share over time or maintain excess or superior profitability over time for any number of reasons. One of them would be, for example, through the discussion of the experience curve, that by being ahead, they will be able to improve their manufacturing at a rate such that they're able to produce the products more cheaply even after their competitors match their products in terms of features and quality and the like. Some firms, however, tend to adopt more of a second mover strategy. In other words, they let other people go first and then they evaluate that move and they make a decision as to whether they're going to copy it or not. And it's kind of their strategy is that they're going to be what some people will call a fast follower or terms like that. What are the advantages to that? Well, you get to sit back and see whether the other product gains any traction in the marketplace. You may get some information on what consumers really want out of a new product and what they maybe don't care about. If you're able to imitate it much more cheaply because the first product solves a lot of problems that weren't necessarily obvious for you, but as soon as you see it, you know the right answer. It may save you R&D. And if it was really a new product that required a lot of advertising to get it established in the mind of the customer, you don't have to make that investment. It's already established when your product rolls out. Some other factors: size of the company. As you would expect, the research shows that small companies tend to be a little more competitively active than do big companies. Big companies are relatively slower to respond. However, when they do respond, they do exactly what you would expect. They tend to poof, bang, bring the big hammer when they come to the fight. So small and agile, big, a little ponderous, but packing a big punch. Market dependence. Not surprisingly, when companies really depend on a market and it gets attacked, they tend to respond. Types of attacks: strategic versus tactical. Now, I consider these very unfortunate terms, and I'll explain why in just a minute. But strategic attacks are perceived to be the big, not necessarily bet the company, but big moves involving a lot of resources. So the global launch of the 787, deciding to build the 787, would be a strategic attack on the part of Boeing. Deciding to offer a discount on the airplane prices would be a tactical attack. Amazon deciding that it was going to launch into the grocery business. There have been lots of online grocers that have tried and mostly failed in the past. If Amazon, the world's leading online retailer, were to get into the online grocery business, that of course would be a strategic attack on the grocery industry. Tactical attacks, these tend to be price cuts, promotional campaigns. For example, when the auto market crashed in 2008 along with the economy, Hyundai came out and really improved their warranty for one, but they also came out and offered a deal where if you lose your job within such and such time, you can sell your car back. So that would be considered a tactical attack, something that was relatively easy to implement, relatively easy to match. And that's exactly what the research shows, that most tactical attacks are matched. The percentage of attacks that are matched are lower for strategic attacks than for tactical attacks. Excuse me. Now let's get into this idea of reputation. And this is that interesting question of when is it rational to be irrational? And that seems odd. Some firms have a reputation. Walmart did for a while, kind of got out of that. Now maybe he's back into that reputation. Probably lots of small businesses have this reputation as well. But when I say small business, I mean in a local market, for example, that when somebody launches an attack, they just don't match. They way escalate. They are disproportionate in their response. And it's almost like they're saying, okay, ladies and gentlemen, you want to go on a price war? Nobody does price wars like I do price wars, and they kill everybody. The industry just dumps red ink. And so at the end of the day, everybody kind of finally works their way out of the attack, and everybody's like, oh man, that was awful. I got my head handed to me. Everybody got their head handed to them, including the person who was irrational, maybe especially the person who was irrational. But what they're looking for is this idea of deterrence, where the next time somebody says, well, we thought about maybe going on a promotional campaign, everybody goes, whoa, 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 whoa. Remember when we did that last time? Company X did this and we got killed. So in some ways, having a reputation of being an irrational competitor may actually be good for the industry because it tends to de-escalate the overall level of competitive intensity. let me get into why I don't like the discussion of strategic versus tactical actions. Well, actually, that's the next slide. Let me introduce this slide. This is out of something I wrote. I'm not asking you to go read it. It's not published in a good journal, but I think this points out some issues that are not commonly talked about when we discuss competitive dynamics. So the awareness, motivation, and capability, that's standard. We all started with that. Then I got into the types of competitive actions. The ones on the top half of the chart, the market actions, the new products, price cuts, service enhancements, those sorts of things, they're talked about a lot. What really isn't talked about nearly as much is this idea of attacking a competitor's resource base. I think in many cases this is done more than we realize, but it's all very deniable, which is true of a lot of this competitive dynamic stuff. It's really cool in part because people deny that they're doing it. But many times firms will announce resource moves that are designed to attack somebody's resource base, but they have a cover story, if you will, that says, oh, no, we have another entire reason for doing this. So in terms of resources, you have the idea of denying resources to your competitors. I talked about stealing employees, and part of stealing that's in the defect. In denying, you're trying to keep the resource from falling into the hands of a competitor. And where this really is seen is in mergers and acquisitions, where companies go out and acquire other companies, not because they really want that company so much because they don't want that company to be available to their rivals. And I think, the perfect example of this, and that was Google's acquisition of YouTube. Back when Google bought YouTube, YouTube was a very new service, less than a year old, had like 40 employees, some servers, and a brand name. And for that, Google paid $1.4 billion. I have little doubt that Google could have quickly matched with its engineering expertise whatever cool stuff there was about YouTube's engineering staff and what they've been able to put together in terms of the software. I also have little doubt that Google, had it chosen to, could have launched its already by then substantial brand name and built up a Google Video, for example, that would have rivaled YouTube and probably quickly eclipsed it. In my opinion, the reason Google bought YouTube wasn't because they needed YouTube. They wanted to make sure that YouTube wasn't available for somebody who did need YouTube, like a Microsoft or a Yahoo. So sometimes it's not about, do I need this resource? It's about, my competitors need this resource a lot more than I do, and I'm going to make sure they don't get it. You also see this with exclusive contracts. It's hard to believe now, but when Apple launched the iPhone in 2007, it wasn't a given that it was going to be a success. And so AT&T was very strategic and locked up almost a 2-year exclusive agreement with Apple that they would be the only one to sell the iPhone. And so what they did was they kept Verizon, T-Mobile, US Cellular, and Sprint from having access to the iPhone. So if you wanted an iPhone, you had to go to the AT&T network, and many people did. And that was a great example of denying the resource. The next is getting it to defect. And that's where I got ahead of myself. This is where you try to take the resource base that's already in your competitor and snatch it away from them. As I said, stealing employees is one. Another is stealing partners. Once upon a time, AT&T, trying to compete with cable, had a bundle between buying their phone service and buying satellite TV. Their partner initially was Dish, and then DirecTV offered AT&T a much better deal and got AT&T to defect to DirecTV, which then obviously took away a big part of the referral base for the Dish network. The last is the idea of debasing the resource base, and this is making it less valuable in the eyes of others, such that you're trying to take something and strip away any brand uniqueness or specialness that's about it. You're trying to make it undifferentiated at worst and devalued at best. My example for that is what Apple did with Flash, and we all understand the issues of Flash not operating on some iPhones and iPads. Really, when you trace that back, that was an attack by Steve Jobs on Adobe, who Steve Jobs hated the CEO of Adobe. And so he just didn't make it so that it wouldn't run. He was very public in saying why we don't put on our elegant, beautifully designed Apple machines this crappy Flash. Well, Flash was one of many flagship products for Adobe that's still around today. So you can see sometimes people will go out and try to really devalue the resource and make a company's past investments worthless. Why do companies do this? One, they're trying to profitably increase their relative market share. We're going to talk about market share a little bit more in a couple of slides. So if you're growing your market share, you'd like to do so profitably. Or maybe you're just trying to improve your profit margins. Maybe what you're trying to do is not so much as take away a bunch of your rivals' customers as you are trying to take away from your rival their most profitable customers while sacrificing your own less profitable customers. And this is really drilling down on your profit pools and knowing who is making you money and who isn't making you money, and shifting off to your competitors, those who aren't making any money, and trying to bring in the whales onto your side. Obviously, the goal of all this is the superior performance. I'm going to stop the video now and come back and finish up with the final two slides.